smells good. Hey friends, welcome back. I am Jason Salyer, and today what I want to teach you is how to press overhead. We're going to go over a military press or overhead press, whatever you want to call it, and a push press, and then we're also going to do a combination exercise at the end. Upper body strength is really, really important, and I think that being able to do a good, solid military press safely, effectively, efficiently is probably one of the best upper body exercises that you can do. And it's not that complicated. There's not that many steps to it, but there's a few basic ones that we should go over. We're going to use a barbell, but it doesn't have to be a barbell. It can be really anything. But the starting position for this exercise, regardless of which one you're doing, whether it be a military press or a push press or even a push jerk, is exactly the same. I want to start with my feet directly underneath my hips. And now the barbell needs to start with resting on my shoulders, okay? It needs to be supported by my shoulders to the point where I don't even need to touch it with my hands. And that's not necessarily a big deal for the military press or the overhead press, but it is a big deal when we transition into those more complicated exercises like the push press. And that'll make more sense here in a second. But I want that weight to be supported by my shoulders and the weight securely in my hands. The elbows are going to be pushed forward in front of the bar just a bit. I don't want to see the elbows behind the bar like this, because if that happens, it's going to be very difficult for me to support the barbell. And the bar's going to want to come down like this, especially when I start driving with my legs. So I want the elbows in front of the bar just a bit, like that, with the weight resting on my shoulders. Now, what's happening underneath the barbell is really important. What I want to try to do is get my body as rigid as possible. It's like a solid foundation underneath a home, underneath your house. You don't want it to move. Regardless of what's happening up here, I need what's going on underneath to be really rigid and unmovable. So I'm going to squeeze my quads, I'm going to squeeze my butt cheeks, and I'm going to tighten up my abs. And that's going to make this solid foundation ready to rock, and it's not going to matter what's going on up here. Everything underneath the barbell, underneath my shoulders, is going to be really, really still, really, really solid. So now, once I've got all that dialed in, my weight is pretty much rooted in my heels. I've got my quads squeezed, my butt squeezed, my abs squeezed, weight resting on the shoulders. I can begin to press overhead. And all I'm going to do to initiate that is get my chin out of the way. I'm going to turtle my chin. You can kind of look up. Some people look up. I don't do that. I like to turtle it a little bit to get my face out of the way, because I want to get this bar pressing straight up in a perfectly straight line. I don't want it to go around my head, because that's inefficient, and I'm not going to be able to press very much weight that way. I want to turtle my chin, and press the bar straight up. So if you're looking from the side, that bar path is a perfectly straight up and down line. Once I get my face out of the way, I turtle my chin, and I get the bar past my head, I'm going to start pushing my head and chest back forward to push it through that hole that I've created with the barbell in my arms. And what that does is it gets me directly underneath the barbell, and I've stacked all my bones. It should be pretty much a perfectly straight line from my wrist to my elbow to my shoulder to my hips to my knees. Perfectly straight line. I've stacked all those bones, and I can support a really, really heavy weight like that. Typically what I recommend to beginners is when they're first starting out is to grip the barbell for almost all exercises in pretty much the same place. And that's about a thumb length out from the edge of the knurling. Now that's going to differ for everybody, and that's going to change over time the more you get accustomed to this kind of stuff. But for the most part, that's a good place to start, is a thumb length from the edge of the knurling where the bar starts to get rough. The most common thing that you're gonna come across when pressing overhead is going to be this. I'm going to exaggerate a lot, but it's going to look kind of like this. This lean back, and it turns into more of a bench press or an incline press as opposed to an overhead press. And that's pretty rough on the low back, especially when it gets to be a little bit heavy. And what you're doing there is you're compensating for a lack of mobility in your upper body, in your shoulders. You're compensating by leaning yourself back. What we've really got to focus on is squeezing the quads, squeezing the butt, and tightening up those abs, and get rid of that arching of the back and the leaning back. So I squeeze my quads, squeeze my butt, get set, rigid, taking a breath, and I stack those bones overhead. Back down, just the opposite path. Now, one of my favorite exercises, upper body exercises, is a push press. And I kind of liken this to cheating, right? It's a more efficient way to get a heavy load from shoulder to overhead. It's basically using your legs to get that initial thrust to launch the bar up off of your shoulders and then just finish with pressing overhead. And you can do a significant more weight overhead by doing this method. The push press is a really, really good exercise, a total body exercise, and I really like it. And it looks something like this. I'll demonstrate it and then we'll go through it. So the mechanics are basically the same. So I'm still getting my chin out of the way, turtling it, getting my head and chest through the hole back at the top. It's exactly the same. The only difference is at the very beginning, I'm going a little bit of a dip, just a few inches of a dip with my legs, pushing my knees forward and out. And I'm driving through my heels really aggressively, squeezing my butt cheeks, tightening everything back up, and finishing with that press overhead. Now the key is to keep that dip and drive, that dip perfectly vertical. The tendency is going to want to be to go to your toes, and you're going to want to dip like this. And if you do that, you're going to end up pushing the weight out in front of you. And it's going to be really difficult to catch back up to it. So what we want to try to do is mitigate that by keeping our dip perfectly vertical. No butt going backward, no leaning forward, just straight up and straight down, really small. Most people will want to try to dip really big. They'll get down here, they'll try to drive it up really far, but almost certainly that's going to make you lean forward. So keep that dip nice and small, short, but powerful. The key there is just to drive through the heels and making sure you're pushing through your heels and not rolling towards the balls of your feet. If you can stay back on the heels and drive that weight straight up, it'll make it much easier. Now, what I like is combination type exercises. I like to train efficiently. I like to kill a lot of birds with a single stone, basically. And something that I'm going to do for today's workout, for my personal workout, is going to be thrusters. Now, a thruster is basically combining a squat, which we talked about in a past video, with the overhead push press. And it looks something like this. Gripping the bar is exactly the same. Bar position on my shoulders is exactly the same, maybe elbows up a little bit for my front squat when I squat. But when I come up, I transition back to that same exact thing we talked about. Bar on the shoulders, squeezing my butt cheeks, squeezing my quads, and then finish with a press overhead. So put it together, it looks like this. And that is a thruster. I used to take my training pretty seriously. Now I just exercise for the most part, and I just gotta go by feel what I'm feeling for the day. And I think what I'm gonna try to do is 5 sets of 2 with a heavy weight. 5 sets of 2 of those thrusters we talked about, and see how it goes. Yeah, that's gonna be good. That's gonna be pretty hard. 5 sets of 2 should be plenty. Yeet. Ooh. I thought I'd up it 20 pounds and see if I can just get 1. If I can do 1 with this, that'd be good. That'd be most I've lifted in a long time. So, see how it goes. That was good. Guys, thanks so much for watching. Like I've said 1,000 times before, physical fitness is one of those It's the most underrated aspects of people's preparations. If you're not physically fit, you're not going to be capable of doing the tasks that are required of you in a survival situation. You're going to be a hindrance. You're going to be a liability to the people around you rather than a help. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you got something useful out of this video. Hit that thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. And then make sure you check me out at On3. See ya.